It's deja vu, people. Does anyone else out there feel like we've seen this before? Events repeating themselves. That's what we'll be getting into on today's episode, along with DFS selections and big time bets for Monday night's games. It's the Stanley Cup Playoffs, baby. Let's go.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. I'm Steele Roden, a recent graduate of the College of Sports Media in downtown Toronto. You can see some of my content on my YouTube page, Sir Odin Sir. So make sure you go follow and subscribe and check out some of my content. And as you can see, unfortunately, my co-host, Big Flip Livingstone, wasn't able to make it tonight, but the show and the episode must go on no matter what. And this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. A lot to get through in such short time with all 8 series in the middle of their series right now, all playing game 4, whether it was Sunday or Monday night, which is tonight. The Colorado Avalanche on the verge of sweeping the Nashville Predators. I don't think anyone else saw this coming, or everyone saw this coming. The Colorado Avalanche, a juggernaut. The Florida Panthers falling apart yet again in the first round. And the Calgary Flames, yet another team failing to show up when it matters in the first round again against a weak Dallas Stars team. But first, we have to take a look at the 4 matchups that were Sunday night. Let's start off with the Carolina Hurricanes and the Boston Bruins. This is exactly how I saw this series going. I still have the Carolina Hurricanes winning this in 6 games, and currently this series is tied at 2 apiece. Both teams winning both games at home, and that's just the way it goes. But I still think Carolina has this in the bag. I said this from the beginning. I believe if Antti Raanta had to start this series, and which he did, and played the first 3 to 4 games, he left game 3 after a little bit of an injury, able to play game 4. But I said if he was able to start and Frederik Andersen was able to come back from injury and finish it off, there's no chance the Boston Bruins have of beating this Carolina Hurricanes team. We saw from the regular season when Frederik Andersen plays, they won all 3 games, outscored them 16-1. And I think if he's able to come back from injury, they have a really good chance of closing out the Boston Bruins and heading to the second round. Even with those 2 losses, though, Antti Raanta played really great. I know they lost 5-2 Sunday night, but that's because Brad Marchand and that top line really stepped up big. Look at Brad Marchand and what he's able to accomplish right now. He's an instigator, an agitator. He gets under people's skins, but he's also producing right now. 3 goals, 6 assists, the best player for the Boston Bruins right now. No question about that. And we always knew that Boston was not going to roll over no matter what. They're always going to battle back. They have some great players, but they're going up against a really great team. And I know a lot of people said that they're not scared of Carolina, but when Frederik Andersen is in net, you need to be scared of this team. They have a ton of skill, a ton of talent, a ton of leadership as well. And they're proving why they were the best team in the Metropolitan Division. And hopefully Frederik Andersen can come back, because I would love to see him back in some playoff action. As of right now, he's still day-to-day. He is getting closer, but he still has yet to get back on the ice. So until he can actually get back on the ice and practice a little bit, the timetable for his return is a little bit unknown right now. But as we get closer to the end of the series, as the days pass, he is getting better every single day. So that's something to look out for. But again, heading back to Carolina, I have Carolina in 6. I think they take it at home. And then again, hopefully they can close out in game 6 on the road against the Boston Bruins and head to the second round. I would love to see that. Let's look at the second matchup from Sunday night, the 4:30 game, the Minnesota Wild taking on the St. Louis Blues. And to me, by far, the favorite series so far. And I saw this coming in before the playoffs even started. Everything is just so back and forth with this matchup. I said this from the beginning. Once again, these teams match up very equally, very equivalent in all departments of the game, forwards, defensemen, and their goalies as well. Jordan Binnington gets the start in game 4 and finally snaps a 9-game postseason losing streak. His last win coming back in 2019 in Game 7 against the Boston Bruins when they won the Stanley Cup that season. So that's a long time coming for Jordan Binnington. He had a rough season. It's kind of like his story playing back on himself. The backup goalie comes in halfway through the season, absolutely dominates, and he's that number one guy right now. But Ville Husso, to me, was absolutely terrible. It was absolutely terrible in Game 2 and 3. So I like the fact that Craig Berube was able to give Jordan Binnington the start. He played a solid game. It was a lot closer than 5-2 what the finish was. They had an empty net, and then as well, Ryan O'Reilly scored in the last a minute and a half in the game. I thought Marc-Andre Fleury had a stellar game. I think the first goal on him the second goal on him was very, very unlucky. His own defenseman put it off his back, and then everyone just crashed the net at that point, and they were able to bury it. But I think a lot of people out there have this series going to Game 7, and I have the Minnesota Wild in 7 games taking this. Hopefully that's the case because, I'd really love to see the Minnesota Wild in the second round of the playoffs. But both of these teams are very much deserving of moving forward. They played very well this entire regular season, very dominant teams. I know Minnesota, a very underrated team. Not a lot of people like to watch them play. But if you look at the way Kirill Kaprizov has stepped up so far this series, I believe he's got 4 or 5 goals in the first 4 games. So if he can continue that and kind of step up going into in games 5, 6, and 7, I think Minnesota takes this in 7 games. But what a series it's been so far. Absolutely love it. So definitely keep your eye out for this series and the games coming up for DFS selections and big time bets. Because Flip and I know once he gets back into tomorrow's episode, he's going to come back with some big time bets, and you better watch out for him because he's been absolutely fire this entire season. Let's jump over to probably one of the most, again, great series to watch right now, but also very, very frustrating. And that's the Toronto Maple Leafs taking on the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I love this series because there's been a ton of goals, a ton of physicality. The pace has been excellent so far. Fire boiling in the players on both teams. We saw that in Game 1 and 2, but that's also where it's been very, very super frustrating for me at the same time. The officiating has been absolutely brutal this entire series. And I know Game 1 and 2, or especially Game 1, got out of hand. 60 and 58 penalty minutes between the two teams, or 110 penalty minutes, between the two teams in Game 1. Things got out of control because Tampa was down 5-0, and they send out their third and fourth line guys just to start some stuff. And it got under the people. It got under Wayne Simmons, Morgan Rielly, Lyubushkin, all those guys. Game 1 was just chaotic. Game 2, the discipline was not there whatsoever for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Wayne Simmons made comments in the post-conference afterwards about the discipline not being there specifically for himself. That's probably why he got pulled for Game 3 and Game 4. And the officiating hasn't been good, though. So I understand there has not been great discipline, especially on the Toronto Maple Leafs side, but the officiating has been absolutely brutal. Soft calls. And I also get that they're looking out for cross-checking. They're looking out for slashing because that's been, the main priority this entire season. Completely understand that side for the refs. But the soft calls that are being made, the taps on the shin pads, a couple of breakaways where it looks like they're getting the stick in the hands, but it's just a clean lift, a stick lift. And there's nothing wrong with that, but they're looking for calls. They're keeping an eye and making sure that, something isn't missed. And because they're looking for things to not miss, they're making bad calls right now. And I have not been impressed whatsoever with the Toronto Maple Leafs, Tampa Bay Lightning officiating this series. I think it needs to be a lot better because you look at the game last night, before the second period even ended, the Maple Leafs had 8 penalties. And the Tampa Bay Lightning, I believe, had 1 or 2. So for me, each game is it seems to be very lopsided, especially for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and just a ton of soft calls. So going into Game 5, I would love to see the officiating be better and let them play. Whatever happened to letting the guys play? And I understand they're looking out for some of those specific, like cross-checking and slashing. I completely understand that, but this is postseason. This is playoffs. Every game matters. And the amount of penalties that I've been seeing in all of these matchups, it's been quite frightening, actually. So hopefully the officiating can get better as we go on. But there's, we'll get into the Edmonton Oilers and the LA Kings series very, very soon. But I need to let everyone know about our sponsor for this episode, BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including this year's NBA playoffs, which are in full effect right now, of course, and the start of Major League Baseball Season 2. Full effect. Let's go, Toronto Blue Jays. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. For your next listen, you have to check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. You don't want to miss out on all the highlights. I know I don't. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast, just like this podcast right here. So if you haven't yet, hit the follow, hit the subscribe button. Once you do, you'll get the latest episodes. And trust me, you don't want to miss out, especially with the playoffs. A ton of content, especially coming out from Flip and I's side. Big time bets, DFS selections, side bets between Flip and I, which I've already won a couple. He's won a couple too. So the money's pretty much just gone back and forth. But let's get down to the last matchup from Sunday night. The LA Kings taking on the Edmonton Oilers. And as of right now, the game has, as of the time I'm recording this video, the game has not started yet. So currently, the Edmonton Oilers are still up 2-1 in the series. And to me, not knowing obviously what has happened with Game 4 right now, but to me, the Kings have a ton of hope left. And I understand that they got absolutely embarrassed in Game 2 and 3. They lost 6-0 and then lose 8-2 in Game 3. So I get that they got embarrassed. Their defense has not been great. We already said this at the beginning, a couple weeks ago. Without Drew Doughty, it's a big ask. Of course, it is a big ask against the Edmonton Oilers. But even then, the Edmonton Oilers defense has not been great either. Their offense has just been absolutely clicking. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and how about Evander Kane? He got a hat trick in Game 2. Absolutely incredible. Or was it Game 3? It might have been Game 3. He got the hat trick, but nonetheless, those three guys have been absolutely incredible. And the fact that you're getting a little bit of scoring and playmaking from those bottom tier guys, Ryan McLeod, Archibald, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins out there as well, getting into the game. So even if the Oilers go up 3-1, because as of right now, I don't know what the score is or what the end of the score was and if the series was tied up. But if the Oilers were to go up 3-1 in this series, I still believe the Kings have a chance because, as I've said many times before, I don't have faith in Mikko Koskinen or Mike Smith. So they might get past the first round, but once they get past that, I don't think they get past the second round because you're most likely going up against the Calgary Flames unless the Dallas Stars can somehow win this series. But I still have faith in this LA Kings team. Their offense is definitely going to have to a lot better. They're going to have to figure things out because you cannot put up 0 goals in Game 2 and 2 goals in Game 3 and expect to go into Game 4 and win with that amount of goals. You need to put at least 3 or 4 behind Mike Smith or Mikko Koskinen, whoever's in net, and let the game come to you because with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl out there, they can change the entire game within an instant with their speed, stick handling ability, and their playmaking ability. So I would love to see the LA Kings get past the Edmonton Oilers. I have the Kings at 7, but that we'll see what happens. Hopefully the series gets tied up 2-2 after the game Sunday night. But let's get over to the DFS selections for Monday night. And of course, I think we have to start with the most dominant team so far to start round 1, Colorado Avalanche against the Nashville Predators. And at this point, it's really a pick or choose who you want from the Colorado Avalanche. Scoring a ton of goals, unlike the Calgary Flames, Colorado actually shows up in the first round of the playoffs. They've scored 16 goals in 3 games. So, and their top guys are, obviously their top guys are, taking it right to them and scoring all these, scoring most of the goals, but they're getting a bunch from some of the guys they picked up Arturi Lehkonen being one of them, but Makar, 7 points, Landeskog, 6 points, MacKinnon, 5 points. So you're getting scoring from those top guys, as well as Mikko Rantanen. I believe he has 5 points so far in 3 games as well, but you're getting the scoring from your top 4 guys right now, and then a little bit of chipping in from those bottom tier guys that Flip and I have talked about a lot over the last 2 weeks. So I think really you just choose and pick who you want from the Colorado Avalanche side, and your DFS selection should hit, because without UC Saros, this series is absolutely over. And even with UC Saros, this could have been, I had the Colorado Avalanche winning in 5 games, but this could have been a sweep no matter what with UC Saros, and that it just wouldn't have been as bad. We wouldn't have seen 7-2, 6-2. It would have been closer to 4-3 with an empty net sort of goal, or a 5-3 with an empty net, maybe a 3-1, but it wouldn't have been as dominant as we've seen, because this Nashville team goes as far as UC Saros, and he hasn't been in the net. David Rittich, Connor Ingram, it's just not going to get the job done. So without UC Saros, this is over. Colorado is going to take the win in Game 4 and absolutely sweep them and be the first team to head to the second round. So keep an eye on them. But for my second matchup for Monday, I'm looking towards the Florida Panthers versus Washington Capitals game. And it's been a back and forth series, the entire series so far. And I said it after Game 1, and I'll say it again. Expect those top guys from the Florida Panthers team to really bounce back after a tough loss. Aaron Ekblad, Alexander Barkov, Jonathan Huberdeau, those guys to really step up and take charge in Game 4, because that's what we saw from them in Game 2 after losing 5-1 in Game 1 to the Washington Capitals. So that's what I'm looking for. Another, sort of trending action that I've seen in the past, where it's been the case so far in this series. The Washington Capitals blew the Florida Panthers 5-1 in Game 1, and then Florida Panthers bounced right back in Game 2 with a 6-1 win, I believe it was. And then again, the Washington Capitals get right back at it, another 6-1 win for them. And I think that's going to be the case so far in this series. So I really expect them to bounce back. You heard it from Sam Bennett and a lot of the guys in the dressing room. No matter what, if they're down in this series, they are not scared whatsoever. We know that they're capable of scoring goals. That's what they really need to do right now. The big question mark, which Flip and I have talked about, is Sergei Bobrovsky. He needs to be a lot better. He's been very streaky. We know that he's very inconsistent with his game. One game, he'll let 5 goals in. One game, he'll let 0 or 1 in. So it all depends on how his game is for that night. But I really expect him to bounce back. And if he's not in net, hopefully Spencer Knight can get the W out and tie the series for the Florida Panthers, because that's where I'm leaning with for my DFS selections. But if you don't like any of those choices too, you've always got the Calgary Flames taking on the Dallas Stars. In that series, I wouldn't go to that series because it's been very low scoring. And I've been very surprised with how low scoring it's been, especially from the Calgary Flames side, because they've only scored 3 goals in 3 games. They won the first game 1-0, shutout in Game 2. And then, they lost, what was it? Yeah, 4. They lost 4-2 in Game 3 to the Dallas Stars. So I've been very surprised so far with the lack of scoring from the Calgary Flames. But this is also one of those things where we've seen it in the past. So even though they're low scoring games, the Calgary Flames top guys are not showing up when it matters right now, especially in the first round and against a weak Dallas Stars team for that matter. So the fact that, obviously the Joe Pavelski line, the top line for the Dallas Stars, that's the line that's really been producing. Jamie Benn, Raffle, those guys are getting into the physicality into the game. And I think that's what's really affected the Calgary Flames so far, even though that they're a chippy team too. The physicality, the grittiness has really gotten to them. I think that's what they're sort of focusing on a little bit more. But Jake Ottinger has also stood on his head a little bit, has stood on his head a lot in Game 2 and Game 3. So credits to him, credit where credit is due, because he's been absolutely fantastic. But you've also got the Penguins and Rangers game for that matter. But this is where it gets a little bit more tricky, because this one could go either way. And the entire series has been very, very high scoring. You get a 5-2 win from either team. Game 2, Game 3, or Game 1, but it can go either way. So the Penguins can go back out in Game 4 and take this one 5-2, or the Rangers come out and take this in a high-scoring game. Besides game one, it hasn't been very close. And game one, to me, again, that one kind of got robbed from the New York Rangers, where I think the Rangers should be up 2-1 right now. But that's a discussion for another day. But those are the matchups for Monday night. I really like the Colorado Avalanche and the Nashville Predators game, along with the Florida Panthers and Washington Capitals. That's where you're getting the high-scoring games really out of right now. That's where you can really target some of those high-end players, and especially for the Colorado Avalanche team. Nathan MacKinnon, Cam Makar, Gabriel Landeskog, the best players on their team right now. The top three players, scoring players for the Colorado Avalanche. So that's who I would go with. And I think that's who you should go with too. And what else you should go with is Built Bar. At Built Bar, they are all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy second. I don't know how they do it, but they pull it off every time. It might be for the fact that Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, and they contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein. I eat them before I work out, after I work out. It really doesn't matter to me as long as I get the chocolate and the protein in me. I absolutely love it, and they're absolutely delicious. And if you haven't tried the Puffs yet, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. It will absolutely blow your mind away. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. And they're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. And they too are also covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite right now with some incredible flavors: yummy churro, coconut marshmallow, and banana cream pie. Go to Built.com and scroll down to the macro chart, and you'll be blown away. High protein, low cal, high fiber, low carbs. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. Don't forget, we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, which also includes YouTube. So if you want to see my beautiful face or Flip's beautiful face when he gets back on the podcast tomorrow, make sure you go hit the subscribe button on our YouTube page. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform. And once you do, you'll get the latest episodes of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. It's that time again, big time bets, where the money's made. It's been a crazy week. I was on vacation. I wasn't able to, make any bets while I was down in Punta Cana. I was watching all the games though. I was blown away with the matchups so far. Wasn't able to place my bets, and the Wi-Fi down there was a little tricky, so I wasn't even to get the opportunity to show them to you on Twitter. But it doesn't matter. We're back now. We're back with the picks, and I absolutely have some fantastic fire picks for you for Monday night. My first one, I'm going back to the well, where I've gone twice so far, and it's hit every single time because this guy is the best player so far in the first round. And he's been the best player in the first round every single postseason for the last 4 or 5 years. And that's Nathan MacKinnon. That's who I've got for my first pick. Anytime goal from Nathan MacKinnon. 4 goals for him in the first 3 games. Excuse me. But Nathan MacKinnon, anytime goal. 4 goals in the first 3 games. He's also got 2 assists for 6 points in the series so far. He's just been absolutely fantastic. And he just makes it look so easy out there every single time. He'll get the puck in his own zone, skate down the wing, make a couple of moves at the blue line, probably cuts into the middle. And it's the quickness to his shot. Always bottom left or bottom right. I love this guy's game, and I love watching him in the first round. I hope he can get out of the second round and even to the Stanley Cup Finals this year. But he's just been absolutely great. So that's my first pick. My second pick of the night, and this is where I'm going back to as well. Another guy who has hit for me a lot of the time in the regular season, so hopefully he can get it back to it in Game 4. And I'm looking at Alexander Barkov for an anytime assist against the Washington Capitals. It hit for me in Game 2 where I said those top guys for the Florida Panthers, they really need to step up their game and take charge, because this team has the potential of winning the Stanley Cup. And if they lose in the first round to the Washington Capitals, it will be another big upset for this juggernaut of a Florida Panthers team. So those top guys in Barkov, Huberdeau, Aaron Ekblad on the point, Sergei Bobrovsky, those guys really need to be at their best, step up, and win Game 4 to tie this series. And I think Barkov has a big part in this and gets a couple of assists, actually. But I will just go with the anytime assist at this point. That is my second pick of the night. And then where I'm going to for my my third and final pick, I'm going on the New York Rangers money line against the Penguins. And I know before I was saying that this one could go either way, but I think this is a chance for the Rangers to really prove that they're not a one and done team. You know, they missed the playoffs last year. I was really expecting them to go far. I was expecting them to make the playoffs last year, and I'm expecting them to make a deep playoff run this year. And I know it's the Pittsburgh Penguins. You're going up against some of the best players that have been over the last decade in Chris Letang, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin. You've got some great young players, Jake Guentzel and Brian Rust, and those guys have really been leading the team so far. Without Jake Guentzel and Sidney Crosby, this team would be down 3-0 right now, because those two guys have really been the top two players, especially Jake Guentzel. I think he's got 4 goals in this series. But I've got to go with the Rangers on the money line. I think, those top guys, and Artemi Panarin and Mikko Zibanejad, really stepped up. Igor Shesterkin had a terrible game in Game 3. I think he gets back in the crease and really shows why he's the Vezina Trophy winner. And that's who I'm going with for my third and final pick, the Rangers on the money line. But, of course, my lock of the night is anytime goal from Nathan MacKinnon. That one's hit for me twice so far in the postseason. It hit it for me a couple times in the regular season as well. And I'm also going to throw out a couple more picks on my Twitter. So make sure you're checking my Twitter or the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast page Twitter for Flip and I's locks of the night and our picks from Monday as well. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode, making it your first listen every day. If you want more gambling advice on what you should pick, but for not just hockey, make your second listen Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q with insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts, just like this podcast right here. So if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Once you do, you'll get the latest episodes of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast as soon as they're available each and every day, Monday to Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning, Eastern time. You don't want to miss out. It's playoff time. The bets will be coming out. DFS selections coming out. Hot takes coming out. Side bets between Flip and I once he gets back on tomorrow's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with just myself. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.